Okay, hello. My name is Aaron Hughes. I hold the Dean's Professor of the Humanities and the Philip S. Bernstein Professorship in Religious Studies at the University of Rochester in the United States, not in England. I've recently published this past year this book called An Anxious Inheritance, Religious Others and the Shaping of Sunni Orthodoxy. And really, the impetus behind the volume was, I think I've always been interested in alterity, like how do dominant groups deal with minorities. I came up with this idea to write a book about how the early Islamic tradition, as it was moving and spreading and becoming increasingly bureaucratic, how it thought about itself by thinking about others. So I try to do this in two ways. The first part of the book deals with what I call the Quranic script. So I look at what I call Quranic others. These are Israelites, Yahud, Christians, mushrikun, munafiqun, etc. I try to talk about how the Quran dealt with that, and then I sort of use this as my base narrative to describe how the subsequent Arabic and Islamic literary tradition thought about others. In particular, one chapter is devoted to Jews. Another chapter is devoted to Christians, and another chapter is devoted to the Shia. And then the final chapter in that is devoted to what I call the amorphous Zindiq, or the Manichaeans or heretics, or whatever you want to call them. And again, the argument is that, I mean, certainly the early Muslim community dealt with and interacted with real Jews, but I tried to make the point in the book that there were these literary types or literary topoi that the Islamic tradition developed, in many ways going back to the Quranic script, that allowed them to situate Jews, Christians, Shia, and Zindics in what I call like a narrative landscape. And all of this, I argue, is the subtitle of the book, is Religious Others and the Shaping of Sunni Orthodoxy. These textual others enabled the Sunni majority to develop its orthodoxy. And again, I think implicit here is that orthodoxy isn't something that falls from heaven, but is something that is a political act in which one tries to carve out space for one's own traditions by keeping others out. The intended audience of this book, I think, is academic. So I've reached a point in my career where I work on two types of projects, what I call academic projects and ones that I call trade projects. So this, I think, is definitely academic. It's meant for other academics. It's meant for people, graduate students, undergraduates who work in Islamic studies and who work in Jewish studies and who work in, I guess, Shi'i studies and Christian studies, in addition to the broader context of religious studies. And then I also work on trade books. One of the questions you were going to ask me in a little bit, Adam, was what I'm working on now. This book, when I finished this book, I was a visiting faculty member at Oxford, just down the street, and I'd finished this in December of 2019, and then in 2020, we all know what happened, and the library shut down, so I began to think about new ways to express my ideas. So I've increasingly been trying to write, in addition to the academic works, some more popular works. Well, I'm working on two books at the moment. One is trade, one is, I don't want to call it academic, but maybe you could say they're both trade, but one is more academic than the other. The first academic/trade book is, I'm a Canadian by birth and temperament, and there has never been a book published on the history of Muslims and Islam in Canada. Nothing. It's amazing. So there's there's a couple articles, a couple book chapters, and they all seem to rehearse the same ideas. So I decided to write a full-blown, large-scale history of Islam and Muslims in Canada, from the early slaves that came over to the first Scottish Muslim immigrants to Canada in the mid-19th century, to my grandfather's generation, which came over in the 1920s, to post 9/11. So this whole thing. So that's and another thing I'm working on is also, it's sort of related to that, but it's definitely a trade book. It's not meant for academics at all. I don't want academics to read it, or if they do read it, I don't want them to judge it by academic standards. and that is I'm a huge fan of the Canadian Bill of Rights, which is also known as the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And not unlike the other book I'm working on, no one has really written a readable introduction to that. It was only written or entrenched in our Constitution in 1982. So I'm trying to offer I call it a biography of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So that's meant for a popular audience, and it's a way to I think sometimes us academics do a disservice when we only write for a handful of other people. And I think we have skills, and if we can write well, we should be able to try to address, a larger cross section of our fellow citizens.